Okay, so I want to talk about variations in personality because a lot of people are under the impression that they understand who they are and how they make decisions. And the majority of people, that's not the case. And so that's why the majority of things don't really work out the way that they want them to. It's not necessarily an unrealistic appraisal of a situation, which it very well may be, but it's usually compounded with a less than accurate appraisal of oneself. And so, you're a different type of person when you are alone, or when you're with a friend, when you're with a stranger, when you're in a crowd, when you're with a family member, somebody you want to impress, somebody that you disdain. And in all these times, you have different emotional inputs that dictate your behavior and your overall perception. Now, that's one aspect, the social cues that you receive, right? And the way that you interact with them. So, you also have, according to Daniel Kahneman, he wrote Fast and Slow Thinking. And he breaks down the mental process as two parts. You have part one and part two, or the fast and slow thinking parts of the brain. And so, part one assesses everything really fast, okay? And it makes general assumptions about things. You get asked a complicated question, you ask yourself a simpler question, and then you substitute the simpler question for the more complicated question, and you believe that you've done your due diligence on this question, and it is dismissed. Very common. The second part of the brain is your conscious part, what you think is you. That's the one that does deep contemplation. You'd have to bring in for complicated arithmetic, that type of thing. Okay? And now, number two is lazy and pushes a lot of work off on number one, which just causes this little glide through life as you enjoy not having to overwork. Part two. The mind is relatively lazy. Most people try to avoid mental gymnastics at any cost. Okay. Now, when you are in love, you change altogether, at least when you're with the individual. Carl Jung talks about that quite extensively. He has the enema and the enemis, which is the masculine part of the female when she is in love, and how her love object brings that out. Okay? The man has a female part that comes out when he is in love, and it radically alters who they are, at least in that time period. So, obviously, that's a lot to chew on, just in general. But as you can see, there is a lot more to just your basic personality or your consciousness in that regard. And it's something that I believe most people should try to meditate on deeply and figure out a few things. So think about the people who you act differently around. Think about in situations where you made decisions that you later on were like, I don't know what I was thinking. Or you find yourself in situations that repeatedly end up happening to you and you don't understand why. Chances are it's something that your automatic part of the brain just flags on and you don't spend the time to break it down. Or the ego, the dreaded ego that lies to you, your self image, who you perceive yourself to be, clashes with who you are in reality. You can notice this in other people who have a real disconnected ego, and they seem delusional. So always be careful of that. Now, in groups, we've seen a little bit of mob mentality. People in a group will do things that they would never do by themselves or with a small circle. Hysteria is very easy. We've seen cities burn down. We've seen autonomous zones set up. We've seen all sorts of riots over the last year, culminating in some people storming a Capitol. And, you know, most of these people did not wake up in the morning anticipating doing that. Maybe some of the people did, insofar as burning down the cities because it kept happening repeatedly by more than likely the same type of individuals. They really needed that. So, it's always something to take into consideration, is not only when you're in one of those situations, take a step back and analyze it and figure out how you wish to approach and what you want the outcome to be. And without being self-aware, you won't be able to control the situation. The only thing in this world that you have control over is yourself. And so if you don't understand what pushes your buttons, you're never going to be able to do anything. You're going to be playing yourself. But remember, we have more in common with each other than the people that want us to fight.